What is your superpower?
I'd probably say my creativity.
Knowing nerdy trivia.
My superpower is being a good listener.
Devising a million questions.
Helping people.
Making people laugh.
My superpower is that I'm determined and never give up.
Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in to the Voices of the Community podcast. How you doing today, Erin?
I'm pretty good. It's been quite a week. I was just thinking it could be really cool to talk a little bit about the things you're seeing in the interview process around the internships that we're having.
So that's very interesting. So we have these internships. They are Meristem, based at Meristem, so the Meristem students get the first picking, but we help the entire state of California, so we have like 3 to 4 people that are going to be interns that are living in the community, but they're not Meristem students. And the first step the first step is the application process. But after they've applied, the second step is an interview. And you said interview, yeah? So
yeah.
The interview, because the interviews are happening right now. So we have these internships. We have an internship in the cafe. We also work in the community. We partner with a local preschool, Wonderland Preschool, and we're actually out in the community as well. We're working on our land. Somebody with neurodiversity, you really want to make sure they understand the job description. So questions in the interview are actually taken right out of the job description. And so if their shift, right, is going to be Thursdays in the cafe, Thursdays 1 to 4 p.m., you actually ask the question in the interview, can you work Thursdays 1 to 4 p.m.? Very basic questions. Also ask them, they're going to do a garden internship, so a very specific question. Can you stand on your feet for 1 hour at the time? Can you deal with hot temperatures? Okay, this is interesting. You might think that somebody applying for the summer internship in the garden can withstand Sacramento temperatures in the summer, but when you have to ask that question to know. The second part of the interview is almost the most important part, in my opinion. It's the experiential interview. So it's a show me interview. We have people that are working in the cafe. Can you clean tables? That's a part of the job. Actually, Marissa is our lead culinary instructor. She runs the internship. She actually has the intern cleaning the table as a part of the interview. They'll set the table as a part of the interview.
Talk a little bit about that, because I think that's a big thing in terms of what you all talk about at TAP, and how important it is for an employer to really understand the type of interview that you want to do for somebody with neurodiversity. And why is it so important to have an experiential piece of the interview, particularly with neurodiversity?
We all have anxiety. Person with neurodiversity really have anxiety. And one thing is when you ask questions like, tell me about yourself. In fact, one of the people came to me today, one of the interns, I think they're interviewing tomorrow, and they said, are you going to ask me about myself in the interview? I said, no, we don't do that. We do not ask you to tell me about yourself. All those open-ended gotcha questions at a traditional interview, they really overwhelm somebody with neurodiversity to the point where they can't perform and they won't get the job. We've seen it because they can't give the answer you need. If they can do the work, right? A lot of people can't look you in the eye and really, give you correct eye contact. But if they can show you that they can do the work, more times than not, that's the better way to do it. And I always say, like, if the job is not going to work out, we've had people in the cafe, we're not going to hire them. If you do a show me interview, you're going to find that out a lot sooner. Oftentimes, they'll do a traditional interview, the person with neurodiversity will get the job somehow. It's a miracle. I can't believe they got it, right? 3 months down the line, their job's on the line. But if the company can offer the support, it's just very, it's easier with the show me interview. I do want to bring it back, though, to Meristem for a bit if I can. So we do all this stuff at Meristem. A lot of it is experiential in nature. That can really help somebody getting a job, help them with the interview. There's just these things we do. A lot's going on in my mind this week. We have our founder, Maureen Turtletub. Our founder, come to visit for the week. And it's actually a new thing that she's doing, where she's working with each department in a training and trying as hard as she can to bring it back to the land, which is one of the keys at Meristem. But Erin, how do you see, Erin, what we do at Meristem? How can that, because my understanding is you don't start with the job or the interview. You actually start building those fundamentals in the garden. I would say also in the craft, but more so in the garden apparently.
Yeah. Well, I think to me, what, like, your point of, we know if somebody's prepared for a job when given the opportunity to show what can you do. And to me, I think the Meristem method or the Meristem program, the intent of the Meristem program is to, in general, provide a really wide range of movement experiences. So even if I'm like carving wood, for example, there's movements that I'm making in woodworking that are all setting my nervous system in a variety of ways, or integrating my nervous system in a variety of ways. So the Meristem program in many is designed around movement, and movement being the fundamental way in which I develop a healthy nervous system. When I have a healthy nervous system, I'm able to manage my sensory input much more effectively. I'm able to regulate my emotions and my thoughts much more effectively through doing. And then, if I feel basically through a wide range of movement experiences, the intent is that somebody has the flexibility and capability to almost go do whatever they need to do for the job that they want to get. Now, you don't necessarily know all the skills, but if you learn the principles of the movements, it's really easy to apply those principles to the movement situation or the experiential situation or interview that you're being asked to do. So ultimately, our hope is that somebody leaves, and when asked to do a particular interview that has to do with, maybe wiping a table or programming a computer or whatever, they have the confidence and the ability to do that from the experiential side of things. And like doing the garden provides you a bunch of different movement skills that you're starting out with. And I think when students have the opportunity to explore a variety of opportunities from that perspective, they're much more successful in going into the experiential based interview.
That's really interesting. And the land is key here. One thing that also comes to mind, we have students that we're desperately trying to help, and it's like we're all banging our head against the wall, but technology is one thing that they don't get the job often, and it's been said. So I'm going to say something here like, okay, so technology can be great. We actually have a program right now working with students on what do they want to, like trying to figure out their future, and they're using an app. And we've heard, me and Eric have heard tons about, there's an app out there that can help somebody get a job. And we've even talked to some woman that is running a company where it is true that an app will be great at narrowing it down. But what I see with the students at Meristem is that they're so stuck on the phone, they're not paying attention to the onboarding process, to the food handler certificate. Like when we're trying to work with them, or they're late, or they're not showing, they're just distant because they're stuck within their phone. How do we get them out of that? We try to put them on land, we try to do all of this, but what's the best? What would your suggestion be?
To get them out of the phone, or
have you seen anything that works? Because I've seen things that don't work.
To get out of the phone.
Yeah, absolutely, and to get back to the job. What I mean?
It's a great question. I don't know that there's a right answer to that question, but what I do know about the phone is, one, it's addicting, and two, it's a really nice way to take your mind off of something and not have to face the real stuff that's often hard. And I think that for our students, there's just say in the world today, there's a kind of a habit that is decompress using technology rather than decompress going out into nature or cooking a nice meal with friends, or all of those things that we probably used to do before TV became a big thing, before the phone became a big thing, and now the phone is just integrated in our culture. And I think that it's kind of become at a level of addiction where you don't even realize, oh my God, this thing has like consumed many hours of my life, and it's really hard to step out. But I will say the things that I have found that do allow you to do that is something that feels better than the feedback that the phone gives you in sitting down there. And to me as an instructor, if I do a really good job at creating an environment or drawing somebody into an environment of, being out in the garden and tasting really good food, or making a homemade salsa that tastes good, or playing a fun game that kind of gets my body going, and all of a sudden, wow, it feels really good to move rather than just sit on my couch, or I'm getting probably crankier and like more slouched and all of those things. I think that is a remedy to getting somebody off their phone. But that takes a big effort. It often takes a team and an environment that has that invitation to draw you out.
What about autonomy? I'm an adult and I can do what I want. Difficult. I'll just pre-emphasize it with the job. Like, it's difficult because a lot of people say, we've gone back and forth at Meristem on the phone policy at breaks and lunches. But the thing is, in the job, of course, no, you're off the phone during your break. You could be on your phone during break and lunch. Yeah. But the moment you're on the clock, that phone goes away. We don't see that at Meristem in so many cases. But yes, when we've got a lot, we're focusing, I have to say high functioning. I don't know that we all like that word, but most of the people that I help are high functioning, meaning that they are, and they can use their brain and think for themselves. And so that can be an issue, because then they're coming back and they're like, well, I'm an adult, I can do what I want. Okay, but we're trying to help to see you have an end goal. I mean, it's just difficult. Autonomy.
Oh, that's a great question. I'd say we all want our freedom. Everybody wants their freedom, and everybody would love to. I think everybody hands down would say, I'd love to be able to do this thing this way.
Right.
And then I think there's the realities of the world. And you have to work, I don't think there's a job that you don't have to work with somebody. Even if you're remote, you still have to email back and forth. You still have to have some sort of communication with another person. And it's really easy to take a stance where this is what I want and I need, and I'm an adult and I should be able to do whatever I want. But when you get into beyond myself in an environment with multiple people or multiple needs or, goals of an organization or whatever it is, all of a sudden I'm coming up against if what I want doesn't quite align, what do I do? And I know we've talked a little bit, I think maybe even the episode with Eric, about the two-way street and how important it is to be able to assess, am I doing my part in the two-way street? Because I can always take that stance and just be like, I'm an adult, I want to make this decision. But great, okay, so you've boxed yourself into a corner at some level where this is who you are and this is, what you're going to do. And the likelihood of you finding a position or a job that can create, that's like that little corner based on only the things that you want is probably not realistic or in the world for you. And so to me, it comes down to I have to be able to understand what the employer needs from me and be able to at least reciprocate on that level. And I think at the end of the day, I've always found that when I reach towards somebody else, or I put in the effort to move, to do my job even better maybe than I could do my job, or go above and beyond in terms of how I engage with another person, that ultimately builds respect from the people around me, appreciation from the people around me, and lays a foundation of trust and respect that long term allows us to work together really effectively. If I start the conversation with, I don't want to do that, or I do it this way because that's how I do it. Particularly in power dynamics, where if I'm an employer saying, hey, I have this bigger goal and this bigger job that I got to get done, and you're coming in to help us succeed in that, and the person who's saying, hey, I want to come help you succeed says, hey, I want to come help you succeed, but I don't want to do that thing, I don't want to do that thing, ultimately makes it really hard for me as an employer to say, yeah, I really want to onboard this person because I like.
It's just funny because I'm sure you've just seen it in general, especially in your role. But with the student, it can be difficult. But one thing that I think we do, I think if you do your job very well, is at Meristem we over-communicate. Maybe you can take this back to your organization. If you're an employer, I'm not sure, but it really works because we're working with this population. I don't know. Because we're working with this population, I would just end with this, Mary, but what we do is we over-communicate. We have meetings where we communicate about students' needs. There is notes that are taken and shared with everybody. Things like medication changes, behavioral things. And there's some staff in there, I can promise you, in these meetings, they're like, this doesn't apply to me. But it actually does. It's interesting, even when you're walking through the campus, or let's say you're on, and I know you say this all the time, always be aware, it's basically like you don't want to have your blinders on, so you always want to have your peripheral vision. Even though there's probably there's a lot of staff, that could be, but you're always observing this and that, and then when you are engaging, the more that you engage and the more rapport that you have with somebody, the more they're going to listen to you, or the more they're going to respect you, I would say, and be able to understand when you say something, and maybe the reason behind it.
Totally. Yeah, and I think for me, I'm always, it's easy to, again, take the stance of that's not for me or that's not how I want to do it. And I think what can be really, when we're talking about working together, working socially at some level, it's always nice if I can say, hey, that doesn't work for me, but I hear, I acknowledge where you're coming from and what your needs are. And what if we tried it this way? If I show up with a creative solution oftentimes that somebody didn't think about, that to me is actually really helpful from the employer standpoint, where it's okay, that's a real accommodation.
Yeah.
And I love that you came with because I might not even know that's how I need to think. But if you showed up with not only, hey, I need this accommodation, but a potential solution based on the understanding of what we're trying to do, that to me is going above and beyond. And it's man, I'd love to work with that person.
And I hate ultimatums, but they work. You can only know so much. If somebody is on their phone when they're supposed to be doing something to get the job, you can always just say, hey, listen, if you don't put your phone down and leave it alone, you're not going to get the job because we have a deadline to do it. You never want to go there, but you can give ultimatums. But I would say that the system that has been built here, which is this system of over communication and everything that Erin just shared, really does work. I mean, it doesn't work in every case, and we are sad when it really just doesn't work. And but it has seen, I would say, a higher percentage of working than not working. Would you say?
Yeah, I think for the most part, one of the cool things that we're talking about at Meristem right now are non-negotiables. And I think this is pretty much what you're saying in terms of what is, what are the non-negotiables of Meristem, or what are the non-negotiables for a student coming to Meristem, for example. Mm-hmm. One of those being, hey, you're not being served by Meristem, and you're not serving Meristem if you don't engage in the program. So that's a non-negotiable. If you have reasons for something that's going on that's keeping you from engaging, then we're happy to help you with that. But if you're ultimately not willing to engage in the program, it's a non-negotiable, and you should probably find a different program that aligns better with the things that you're looking for. And the same principle is to jobs at some level. But
I'm sure you've seen it too, where it's individualized. So, okay, you say this program isn't right for you, or because you're not engaging. Not engaging is different for every person, but you kind of have to say standard. Yeah. When you're working with this population, because so many times I've seen people with this neurodiversity that were but I'm different than everyone else.
Yeah.
You have to just set a baseline, I guess.
Totally. And engagement at the end of the day is measurable. It's you showed up, you asked the question, you advocated for yourself, when something wasn't going well, you communicated your needs, etc. And so to me, I think when I'm able to, like, if I need to support somebody to do any one of those things, like, hey, I realize that you're struggling with advocating for yourself, let's figure it out so that you can engage more effectively. I think that's our job, really, to help you out to do that if you're struggling. Right. But if we do that and you're still like, you know what, I just don't want to advocate, or I just don't want to engage today, that's a non-negotiable. And it's just, ultimately, it's not going to work. And you need to take a reflection.
By feeling.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm only going to show up to engage when I feel like it.
Yeah.
Doesn't work because it's not, I mean, it's one thing if you were sick, but, I just don't feel, or because, so many people with neurodiversity are masking all the time. So sometimes they really get tired and they didn't handle it properly and they're just like, I'm just exhausted today, I can't deal with it. Well, most employers don't accept that. So yeah.
Well, yeah, and to me, I think it's always like, if you have a good reason, I think we live in a tough time where, at least in America, we're very capitalist. I'm going to go a little bit, off the rail here for a second, but there's a real push where you're constantly having to work, and it's a 40-hour work week, and it's a grind for a lot of people. And that could be exhausting. Mm-hmm. This is me, Erin, talking. I think that we need to really be thinking about how we can maintain our health and a healthy life-work balance and still be able to live and have a thriving life. And I don't think necessarily, let's say, the system in the US is set up so in that regard. And so I think particularly for neurodiversity, where I don't think that they often have the endurance that your average person has in terms of being able to put their nose to the grindstone over and over and over again for an 8-hour day, for a 40-hour week, for 52 weeks out of the year. I think sometimes you got to make those accommodations. But there's also developmentally this challenge that's like, well, I just don't feel like doing that. And that, to me, like, if you can identify it, often is apathy. Like, I don't want to engage my will to do the thing that I know I need to do. And so I just kind of sit back and say, you know what, I don't feel like doing that today.
And if you're an employer, please don't take it so in some cases they should be fired. Don't take it the wrong way, but it almost, in certain people, it sounds defiant. Like, I'm not doing it today, which isn't the case, but they didn't handle that properly, the individual.
Sure. And that, to me, is where, like, I think it's important to be supportive and ask those clarifying questions, like, hey, are you just exhausted today, and can we accommodate that? Or are you just being like, yeah, you know what, I don't want to do that, and I'm being real apathetic around the work that needs to get done, and I just don't want to do it.
Right.
And it's not always easy to figure out which one it is.
Right.
Before we break out, what were like 2 interviews that you saw this week for the internships where somebody did something really well, and what were 2 takeaways of things that you would want to share for the greater audience to learn from?
Oh, well, let's start with learning first, ladies and gentlemen. Now, communication is one thing they're missing in an interview. If you're missing the interview, you must communicate to the person interviewing you or your manager, should you not have the interviewer's contact info. But not communicating to anybody this has been a big thing at this, not communicating to anybody your location, where you are, isn't good because, for the job. There are many reasons why it's not good at this Meristem. Safety being one of them, but because with the job, you're not going to get the job if you don't show up to the interview. And if you I allow a rescheduled interview, and I'll even go to the individual and say what was going on today, but I need communication. So that's number 1. And then just showing up, I haven't seen it too many times, but just disengaging. Like, Erin talks a lot about the disengaging. I mean, he just spent 20 minutes on it. We have interns that get accepted for the job, and then they don't show up for shifts. They're disengaging. Maybe they don't really want to do it. I'm not sure if they were pushed into the job for money being one reason, or they felt like they're going to owe it to somebody to do it. It's better to be upfront, like they're working in the cafe and accepted the job and they never show up they show up for a shift, they're leaving early, they're AWOL, they're just not there. That's like but we saw some really successful in the we have a bed and breakfast internship where we are cleaning the bed and breakfast. Well, yeah, and we have seen very successful. They're making the bed, they're following the step-by-step guide on how to do it. We saw some wonderful digging today by a student intern in the garden, digging a hole 2 feet deep, following Demetrio, our land instructor. That he's going to be the land intern in charge of the internship, and he is. It was wonderful. He instructed this student intern to dig the hole, and then was following all the instructions. He followed the weeding instructions. The instructions for the weeding project, it was an overgrown shrub that he said, Demetrio said, can you weed it on your own? Figure out how to weed it. I'm not going to tell you what tool to use, do your hand or what, just do it. And he figured it out, he got it done, it was wonderful. He was ready to go. So that we will see heat might be an interesting factor over the summer for this individual.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was our 2 takeaways and 2 things to learn from. Just show up, and communication is key. So
love it.
I will end on communication.
Yeah, those are really good, Harry. I think to sum it up, you can do really well in the interview, but it is also important to continue doing well. Like you got to keep showing up, and oftentimes in an interview, they don't need you to reinvent the wheel in that moment. They don't need you to show something that's way beyond yourself in that given moment. They just need you to show up and do what's being asked of you to do. And if you can, like, it seems simple initially, but some of it can be really like, man, I might think, oh, well, I could do this differently, or what if I did this that way, or whatever. And in an interview situation, it just makes sense. Hey, if somebody says do these 5 steps, I do these 5 steps, and I don't need to add any coloring. If I'm really good, maybe I could do those 5 steps perfectly and add a little bit of something to it. But the more important part is that I nail those 5 steps rather than try to change the process or the system.
Right, absolutely. And as we move through the internship, we'll update you on the next step. So the next step is going to be the onboarding. There are some specific steps that we recommended to have training for an employer at onboarding, and we'll go over that maybe next week or. That could be a good topic for next week, the onboarding, and then building that support. Oh, we can bring in a job coach after that because we're going to build support into the, by the way, if you're somehow an employer watching this, tapautism.org, come and talk to me, we'll take the training together, but building a champion, somebody who could support the intern long term and then adjusting as we need to. So as we move through the process, we'll make another episode.
Awesome. Thanks, Harry. Good conversation today.
Absolutely.
Meristem Podcast out.